r/AskReddit. Redditors with thin walls. What have you heard in your apartment? I've heard my neighbor giving his granddaughter a xylophone. For birthday, I guess. She could play it well and kept playing for a while. Immediately after she left, I could hear him trying to play something his granddaughter played. He practiced for a solid hour until he managed to play this song correctly and stopped with a joyful yes. It was one of the purest things I've ever experienced. What a wholesome break from bad music and people banging. Someone sneezed. We said bless you. They laughed. That's very thin a sheet of paper. Damn it, Lawrence. Can't you just pretend like we can't hear each other through the wall? Yeah, I had that quite a few times with my neighbors of 4 years. Sometimes we'd be cooking at the same time and shout it needs more salt or something through the wall that divided the kitchen. But shouting bless you to a big sneeze was the best fun. I gave them a key when I went traveling and they'd water my plants and collect my post. Sometimes they'd fill the fridge with bread and milk and a bottle of beer for when I returned. When my mum died, they had bought flowers for my return. For the life of me, I don't know how, but they'd chosen her favorite flowers and had as many as my mum had had children. Good neighbors. I miss them. Are you my old neighbor? First day in my apartment, I was sitting on my empty living room floor eating pizza. I sneezed and I heard the guy above me say, bless you. He was my favorite neighbor after that. You're only with me for the crack, my next door neighbors. Yes. Yes, I am. It's not quite a neighbor story, but I used to live next to a park and you'd hear the craziest stuff from the addicts who slept there at night. My favorite was two guys yelling at each other around 1 AM when this exchange happened. You're not a road dog. You don't deserve to be a road dog. Well, you're a rapist. I still don't know what a road dog is. I once said something similar to my GF during an argument. You're only with me for my penis. She still won't let that down. Were they Irish? Could have been Craig. My upstairs neighbors taking turns zapping each other with a stun gun, hitting the floor, groaning in pain, and then laughing like Beavis and Butthead. This is a special breed of dumb. I'm pretty sure I'd like your upstairs neighbors. I'd totally let myself be tased at least once. I lived next to a couple some years ago and they came home after a night out and started fighting about who was better at darts. I thought they were joking, but it got pretty heated. Doors were slammed. Edit. Since people are asking, they were playing darts at the bar earlier that night. From what I could tell, they were playing as a team and the boyfriend wasn't pulling his weight and was super defensive about it. Had an off night, allegedly. The girlfriend was mad he couldn't accept she was better. I'm no detective, but think they had some relationship issues bigger than darts. I still don't know who thought it was a good idea to combine alcohol and darts. Yesterday when I was taking a shit, my neighbor was blasting classical music on full volume. It was the most majestic and relaxing shit I've taken in a long time. Holy fucking shit. Pre-dawn hours, blizzard outside, everything still and quiet. My roommate and I heard our neighbor on the other side of the firewall fart, wet and deep like a stifled baritone sax, and exclaimed to himself in a twisted combination of awe and disgust, "Oh my god." We burst out laughing and hear him chime in with pride, "Did you guys hear that?" Vindicated that his fart was heard and forever lives in our memories. This one is my favorite. My dad used to fart loudly in his sleep, and I told my sister it sounded like someone slapping a vat of butterscotch pudding. She laughed so hard she cried, peed in her pants, and woke my parents up. We were in our 20s, so it was kind of awkward. I read this in Kevin Malone's voice. Pride and all. Upstairs neighbors were a single mom and teenage daughter. They were very loud. The mom's room was above my room. One day I had off and was woken up by sex upstairs. It was pretty common in the previous couple weeks. This time, though, someone came in and started screaming, "You're having sex in my bed." Turns out the daughter had been skipping school and coming back to the apartment with her boyfriend. They were the ones having sex in the mom's bed. The fight that ensued should have earned both women awards. I have never understood having sex in your parents' bed. Like, why? Don't you have your own bed? My ex-neighbors never let their kids leave the house and preferred to raise bubble children. The older son, 12 or 13, was pitifully fragile. One day I heard him crying because he shit on his own hands. He shit on his own hands. Wait. What? That justifies calling authorities to investigate whether there is abuse going on imo. What? My dad snoring like a bear, and my mum snoring like a walrus. If they argue, they snore out of sync, and if they have a nice day they snore in sync. It's really quite sweet. What? First heartbeats, now snoring? I read in a psychology book about sleeping and breathing, and the impact of that in couples. A romantic couple tends to synchronize their breathing. I guess snoring works too. If they really argue, only one of them snores. Our neighbors were once talking loud and I was nosy, so I put my ear up to the wall and realized she was reading him Harry Potter pretty enthusiastically, and it made my heart melt. Did you ask for them to keep reading when they stopped? My roommate and I loved to read to each other on the back porch. They introduced me to the Ender's Game series and we were going through it together. Wondered a few times if people passing by heard us. Glad to know they would have liked hearing it. Gonna miss that badass porch though. I moved from far away, so I have a different state license plate than everyone else at the apartment complex. A couple of days ago I had my upstairs neighbor drunkenly ranting to his wife about what he thinks I'm up to. He's convinced that I'm on the run from something. I'm just in grad school, mayo. Okay, but take a second to realize the opportunity you have here. I'd personally play this one out. Give vague answers when asked about your life. When walking to your car, look over both shoulders at least once a week. Fake a phone call while they're home with a vague but suspicious conversation. If you see them in the hallway, ask them if they've seen someone resembling a sketchy character you've made up. You have a chance to be truly mysterious. They'll tell stories of you for years to friends about the neighbor who may have been on the run. Eater, thanks for my first silver stranger. Very cool. Eater 2, y'all are too awesome. Thank you for the second and third silver. Grad school, for crime. An argument about money while I was doing the dishes. It ended with a slam door and one of them on a piano, hitting the keys like a maniac. Some people read. Some people go get something to eat. Some people exercise. This motherfucker relieves stress by going crazy on a piano. Lol. Angrily plays Mozart. The best is getting frustrated because you can't play something right and then just smashing the keys angrily really gets all of that anger out of the system. I could hear my neighbor fart, and when her phone went off on vibrate, it was like having roommates I couldn't see. Oh, I thought they were connected. Every time her phone went off, she farted. Found my neighbor. Edit. Sorry, not sorry. What can only be described as my flatmate having phone sex while using Christian Bale's Batman voice. I'm Fatman. It's not the awards I received, but who I fap to that defines me. My last apartment had particularly weak walls between apartments. One night I was reading in bed and I was unknowingly the third party to a particularly nasty fight between the couple living next door. The fight lasted for almost an hour and was apparently the end of their said relationship, as she was going to leave him and the apartment the next day. The longer the fight went on, the more interested I became as I pieced snippets of the reason for the fight together. I did not know them personally, only enough to wave and say hi, help them with carrying up groceries etc. Good neighbor stuff. It seemed couple A, both early 30s, were becoming bored with their sex life. For whatever reason they decided that they would fulfill a fantasy of theirs and invite a third individual to join them sexually. Male A and female A found through some online means male B to join them. I guess things worked out for a while. From the snippets of the fight I caught, male B had joined them on multiple occasions for various sexual escapades. The kicker was female A came home early from a work trip and found male A and male B deeply engrossed in their sexual acrobatics without her. Female A flipped out, and I guess after that point they tried to patch things up, but she caught both of them on 2 other occasions, the latest being the night before fight night that I was unashamedly listening to. Neither neighbor would hold my gaze for long the next morning. I think they were too embarrassed or ashamed to ask if I had heard anything and presumed I heard it all. I even offered to carry a box of stuff she was lugging out of the apartment. Remember, good neighbor. She mumbled something and said no. He was packed, moved out and gone a week later. Needless to say, it was the most interesting thin-walled apartment experience I have had the vicarious pleasure to be part of. I got way too excited when I read the 4th paragraph. One day my neighbor was spontaneously singing the national anthem, America, and stopped midline and cussed because they messed up the words. So I sang the correct next line and they burst out laughing before coming back in and finishing the song with me. I've still never met that neighbor. 10/10 voice. I try to do this if I know the lyrics to a song. Don't really have a great voice though. That's the beginning to a romance anime if I ever saw one. My landlord fucking his wife couple of times per week. She screamed like a porn star. They were on the 1st floor and I was on the 2nd one. Sometimes if I'd walk above their bedroom and they heard it they'd stop for a couple of seconds and go right back to Boner Town after. Edit. Forgot something. So yeah, we were 3 guys living in the apartment and we'd often invite some girls over, friends, to have dinner and drinks, but we would usually stay up pretty late and it would be in the middle of the week, pretty much once a week. They were the kind of girls who laugh talk pretty loud, and our landlord asked us if we were having orgies. He wasn't even kidding. Didn't know how to respond to that, so we just laughed it off and kept him wondering. I felt kinda bad for a previous neighbor of mine. A few times a week he got to hear my BF plowing me like a cornfield. I did my best to be quiet, but was told he could hear the different positions I was so loud. I lived next to a guy who took care of his disabled girlfriend. She stayed home with a nurse while he worked to support them and pay for her health care. Everyone really admired him for it. He used to get drunk and tell her that if she doesn't start putting out he's gonna throw her ass out. How the hell did that get so grim, so fast? Nice twist ending on that script. Night Shyamalan. I was expecting something nice and now I feel like I turned hard into a wall. I've been hearing Don't Stop Believing by Journey every morning at least twice for about a month now. You shouldn't stop believing. I've heard and felt the neighbors upstairs having sex. And apparently they like to rearrange the furniture at least twice a week. My upstairs neighbors used to do the furniture moving thing. We both had studio apartments and it was a huge mystery to me how they could move what sounded like a warehouse full of furniture for an hour in such a tiny place. My roommate talking to himself. I sometimes laughed quietly at his jokes. Edit, since you all are asking. They're not really jokes, they're just random, silly things he says. Your neighbor tells jokes to himself? Does he laugh at them too? Because, I have to figure he already knows the punchline. Sometimes that takes the humor out of a joke. More what my neighbor heard. I'm a deep sleeper and was an even deeper sleeper as a teenager. My phone alarm was going off for 30 minutes and my neighbors could hear it through the walls, assumed it was a burglar alarm and called the police. Waking up to the police banging on my door was confusing. The alarm worked, just in a roundabout way. Honestly, I'm jealous you can sleep this deep. Well, I hear my neighbors having sex quite often, but a few weeks ago I literally heard a full-on divorce. Maybe you only heard one of your neighbors having sex. My neighbors had a party at 4 AM. They were playing Gangnam Style and some very bad country music. That's when you should have counted with the most extreme death metal you could find, cranked up to full volume. I am so sorry, are you okay? Oh my god. Couple upstairs would argue frequently. One particular evening, they had an epic battle. It was hours long. About 2 hours into the argument, 11 PM on a weeknight, we heard the woman shout first of all. That was the moment we knew sleeping wouldn't be restful that night. That was the moment we knew sleeping wouldn't be restful that night. Reason number 19 I think you're the worst is how you wash the fucking dinner plates. Gina, I love you. Gina, no. Gina, damn it, put the knife down at this point. Both the apartments adjoining to Gina's called the police. Gina's husband decided to spend the night elsewhere. Can you elaborate on the story? I'm curious. Neighbor worked out and hired a new sitter. New sitter invited 2 guys over. Kids were only 3 and one heard her say if we leave to go to the corner store now, the kids will be fine alone for 20 minutes, and heard them talking about popping some of mom's Xanax and selling them. Then they promptly left. I walked out, knocked on the door and the 3-year-old boy came out. I called the police, went into the apartment, found mom's work number next to the sink and she was furious. Left work and came back home, and as she was walking up to thank me and the officers, The babysitter and guys came into the complex. Mind you, this was all within an hour, not 20 minutes lol. Mum whooped babysitter, then called babysitter's mom and she got another whoopin'. Got offered a sitting job after that and took it. Lol. Also have heard one of my neighbors talking in tongues and yodeling. Glad I don't live in apartment anymore. Good on you for taking action to ensure those kids' safety. I'm sure their mom was extremely grateful of you. You're a very good person for doing that. William. We do not hit. His mom was visiting. He was 30. Poor mom. I feel bad for laughing at this. 1. Lots of fugging. 2. My presumably constipated neighbor trying to poop. Aka 5 minutes of grunting and heavy breathing. 3. Someone snoring like what I can only describe as a diesel truck revving its engine. 4. A little girl practicing playing what I think was a violin every night for a while. 5. Someone blasting Middle Eastern music. I shazamed it and the song is called Mundian Tabakken. 6. What sounded like a woman forcing herself to puke, with lots of crying. IDK if she had food poisoning, or was bulimic or what. That song is Indian. And very old annoying. Very abrasive tune. My sympathies. Heard the couple next door arguing. The wife was furious because she realized he had been cheating on her after she found out she had chlamydia. He tried to convince her that she must have been the unfaithful one. She still lives there. He doesn't. My parents told me stories about the apartment they lived in when I was a baby. The lady above us was a classically trained pianist and her music room was above my room. Apparently when I would start crying in my crib she would start playing and I would go right to sleep. After my parents divorced, my dad stayed in the same apartment. A few years later when I went to visit him, I was about 10 or 11. I got to finally meet her for the first time. The woman who used to play me to sleep as a baby taught me how to play the piano 10 years later. That's obscenely wholesome. Sorry about the divorce, but it's still a sweet story. Not quite what I've heard but more. Once I realized my previous apartment had very thin walls. My roommate and I would just yell at each other from our respective rooms if we needed something. It was great, no one had to leave bed. Hey Peter, man. Check out channel 9. Not in my house, but I travel a lot for work and stay in a lot of hotels. So far my favorite was hearing someone banging around in the shower for a while, then this exchange. Loudly, hey. Wash my balls. Louder, wash your own goddamned balls. Yelling, fuck you, your pussy stinks. They got quiet after that, probably because they heard me howling with laughter and realized people could hear them. Oh boy. My old neighbors were the absolute worst. Their apartment was behind mine so we shared a bedroom wall. Loud sex as well as full-on fights at 4 AM. I heard the entire breakup. She told him to just leave, and he did. She wasn't expecting that I guess and spent the next several hours sobbing and yelling, why are you doing this to me? She also called him about 40 times with no reply. Then got to hear all her rebounds, one of which came over around 2 AM and couldn't keep it up, which led to her yelling at him. That didn't stop them though. They kept trying for hours and when we knocked on the wall they fucking knocked back. Bitch. I have a job to get to in 3 hours. God, I hated her. Another time I overheard her almost overdose in the bathroom. The BF called her parents who called an ambulance. When her BF left she also stopped taking care of her dog, so she would just take it right outside her front door to shit and never cleaned it up. I don't even know her name but I know more about her personal life than probably most of her friends do. They warned me about you. I never should have married you, my 60 neighbors. And recently a heated argument between different neighbors' adult kids. The son had caught his son, 5 playing doctor with his sister's daughter 4 They argued very loudly about it in their back garden, which is completely surrounded by other houses and apartments. I think at least 30 households could hear it. Edit. Playing doctor means getting naked and comparing bits. My friend's boyfriend doing Ace Ventura and Austin Powers impressions to make her laugh. Do I make you Randy, baby? My neighbor has a daughter that plays the violin. Let me tell you, she sucks. My neighbor's daughter used to play the piano. Always struggled to play Fur Elise and I thought it was a hard song because of how overrated it is. This year started kinda learning basic stuff from my friend who takes lessons. Learned to play that song in a week and realized that she wasn't struggling cause it was difficult, she was just bad. My university accommodation had paper thin walls, you could hear people having sex 5 doors down, and I could hear my friend's music from even further away. Yeah, my college dorms were the same. My roommate asked from her room how to spell something, and our neighbor called to tell her how to spell it. It was hilarious to us. The mother screaming at her eldest son. Why don't you love me? You never do anything around here. You don't love your siblings. You're horrible. Name. Inaudible wailing. So that's fun. This isn't necessarily what I overheard. Both me and my mother were out of town when it happened. She was coming home when it happened and I was down south visiting my dad for Christmas. It's about 11 years ago when I was like 6. Some kid who snuck into our apartment building shot and killed a cop right in front of our apartment door. The dude was sneaking into his GFS apartment because her parents weren't home and the cop asked him if he lived there. The kid lied and I'm guessing the officer found out, so there was a bit of a scuffle. At one point or another the kid got a hold of the cop's gun and shot him while he was down after falling down the stairs. When my mom got home our door was broken into due to the officers looking for the guy. They tracked in brains into our house apparently, so that's fun. The shittiest part though was this little scarecrow I had outside our door that my mom had to throw away. It was drenched in blood and brain matter. This also happened right after Christmas, so it was probably extra traumatic for both the victim and the shooter's family. I don't even live in a dangerous part of Metro Detroit. I live in the suburbs, so it was really shocking. The officers at the police station where the cop was from come and light candles with his badge number every year on the anniversary. I'm almost 18 now and I think about that cop every time I walk in the communal hallway. If you want to learn more, just Google it. I'm sure many articles will pop up. It was highly covered in Michigan, the rest of the country. Edit. It wasn't a Detroit PD officer, it was the local police department. Might have actually been a state officer because I live right next to their station. I'd link an article, but I'd rather people find things on their own for my own privacy, as I still live in the same building as I did 10 years ago. Neighbor to her son. If you want her to, you need to manscape down there. It's only fair. Me. In my living room. My 300 pounds neighbors plowing like Jersey bears. It would have cost you exactly $0 to not put this image in my mind. Lived next door to an elderly couple. Woman was complaining at 2 AM that she needed ginger ale because her doctor told her to drink it and he had to go buy some. Dude listening to country roads on loop for like 4 hours at like 2 in the morning. My neighbor across the hall, middle-aged man, blasts Rihanna and argues on the phone, and my old neighbor below me snored. Not complaining though, when you live in an apartment building you're going to hear other people. The only time I got annoyed with hearing my neighbors was when someone was trying to play Christmas songs on a trumpet. I hate Christmas songs, so hearing someone struggling on a trumpet gets real annoying, real fast. My neighbor's kid has a goddamn recorder. Enough said. I heard my roommates having sex very loudly. I didn't say anything at the moment but sat them down the next day and talked about it. Turns out the boyfriend was at work during the time it happened. Everything that goes on in the parking lot. Sounds like I have a window open even though I don't. People blaring music. Car alarms going off. Just shit like that, and it keeps me up all night. In our old apartment our upstairs neighbor had extremely loud, theatrically enthusiastic sex in the middle of the day. The puzzle was that he would stop in the middle and we'd hear him walk to where the bathroom is, stay there for a minute or two and then walk back and resume in the bedroom. It was the same pattern every time. We could never figure out what that was all about. Any ideas welcomed. My man, he's going for 2 different rounds. Round 1. Do IT. Finish. Enthusiastically, apparently. Small break to clean up. Round 2. Honey, your turn. You put it in my ass this time. My downstairs neighbor has a genuinely beautiful singing voice. She thinks she's just singing to herself, but sometimes I stop what I'm doing to listen because it's so beautiful. Am I invading her personal space by eavesdropping without telling her? When I was an older teenager I had my own tiny apartment in the hood and a raging arsehole gang member for a boyfriend. We would get in raucous fights and my downstairs neighbor would call the police. One time, I was crying quietly after a particularly bad fight that had gotten physical and I heard my neighbor arguing with her husband. No, I'm not going to mind my own business and ignore it. I don't care that he always comes back the next day and she forgives him. One day he's going to really hurt her or kill her and I'm not going to live with knowing that I sat there and did nothing when I knew a girl was being abused. I was naive and in love, I thought, and ignorant and young, and I had never considered it abuse. That felt so melodramatic, but I realized that my neighbor was right. Finally left him for good after that fight. So, good looking out random lady in East LA in 1999. I'm sorry for being the worst neighbor imaginable. Child abuse, beatings and horrific name calling. The police Jeff. They won't even send an investigation unless I actually see something, but it's just the sounds of smacking, screams and sobbing through a wall. My male neighbor from India belting out Hello by Adele at the top of his lungs. It was magical. I haven't heard much, but my neighbors probably hear me singing and making noise. God bless them for not saying anything. My neighbor has a lot of cats. If anyone who's encountered cats before, you know that when they're in heat, they tend to make these god-awful fucking screeching noises. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. One night I was sleeping after working a 16-hour shift only to hear that shit coming from the other side of my bedroom wall. I almost called the police. Sex noises. Sex. Fights. Playing. Cursing. Cheering. Crying. Laughing. Drinking. Smoking weed. Eating. Shitting. Sleeping. Coming. Leaving. Living. My downstairs neighbor is a fit, active, and energetic woman in her mid-60s who looks like she's in her late 40s. She masturbates at almost any hour of the day, a few times a week, which normally would be fine, but she cries when she does it. She cries, moans, and calls out to God. It is incredibly strange, and it's the worst when it wakes me up at 3 AM. I don't really have thin walls, but my neighbor and his girlfriend have no concept of inside voices, so I can hear everything they say. It makes me so miserable because he's such an annoying asshole. My old roommate's bedroom was right next to mine and I could hear him playing video games all the time. He was always playing with his friend online named Fred. It wasn't until maybe a month later that I found out that Fred was short for Frederica and she was from Europe. It just kind of blew my mind.